I'm Ethan Walker, 34, standing outside my grandmother Eleanor's colonial home, my stomach in knots. 5 years since I walked away from my toxic family, yet here I am for her 80th birthday. My tech company's worth millions now, something they don't know. My sister Heather's text insisting I attend seemed strange, almost eager. I sensed a trap, but couldn't miss Grandma's milestone. I just didn't realize I was walking into an ambush that would expose everything I'd built and kept private. Before I continue this story, let me know where you're watching from. Hit that like and subscribe button if you've ever had to distance yourself from toxic people, because trust me, what happened next changed everything. Growing up in Brookline, a prestigious Boston suburb, should have been idyllic. From the outside, we had everything: my father Franklin's successful investment firm, my mother Diane's social connections, our sprawling colonial with the manicured lawn. But behind closed doors, our family dynamic was poisonous, particularly for me. My father ruled our home with cutting remarks and impossible standards. "Mediocrity is for other families, not the Walkers," he'd say, examining my report card. A 96% on a calculus test wasn't celebration-worthy, it was careless mistakes that cost you 4 points. Nothing was ever good enough. My mother Diane wasn't much better. While she never matched my father's direct criticism, she specialized in subtle undermining. "Oh honey, you're trying so hard," she'd say with that pitying smile when I showed her my science fair project. "Maybe next time you'll place." Her backhanded compliments were sometimes worse than my father's open disapproval. Then there was my sister Heather, 2 years older and the undisputed golden child. Where I received criticism, she received praise. Her B-plus grades were showing improvement, while my A-minuses were disappointments. When she made the junior varsity tennis team, our parents threw a party. When I became captain of the debate team, they forgot to attend the ceremony. Only my grandmother Eleanor seemed genuinely proud of me. "You've got a good head on your shoulders, Ethan," she'd tell me during my visits to her home. These moments were precious, though I later realized even Grandma was sometimes manipulated by the family dynamics, fed stories about my attitude problems, or lack of commitment. Despite the constant criticism, I excelled academically. I was on the honor roll every semester, captained the debate team to state finals, and developed a passion for computer programming that my father dismissed as playing with toys. I spent countless hours in the school's computer lab, teaching myself coding languages and developing simple programs. It became my refuge from home. My senior year of high school brought the first major battle. I'd been accepted to NYU on scholarship for computer science, but my father had different plans. "Walker men attend Harvard Business School," he announced at dinner, as if the matter was settled. "I've already spoken to my alumni connections. But I want to study computer science, not business," I argued. "And NYU has one of the best programs in the country." His face hardened. "This tech hobby of yours is just that, a hobby. You need a real education for a real career. Harvard Business." End of discussion. When I stood my ground, he issued his ultimatum: "Harvard Business or you're on your own. Not a penny from us." My mother took his side, as always. "Ethan, why must you always fight what's best for you? Your father knows the business world." Heather, home from her first year at Harvard, smirked across the table. "Not everyone is cut out for Harvard, Mom. Maybe NYU is more Ethan's level." That night, I made my decision. I accepted NYU's offer and packed my belongings. My father, true to his word, cut me off financially. Thankfully, my scholarship covered tuition, and I worked part-time jobs to handle living expenses. Those college years were tough but transformative. I thrived academically while working at a local tech repair shop and waiting tables on weekends. I found friends who appreciated my passion for technology. For the first time, I felt validated for who I actually was, not measured against impossible standards. I maintained minimal contact with my family during those years. Obligatory calls on holidays, occasional texts with my mother. After graduation, I stayed in New York, determined to make it in the tech industry. I lived in a tiny apartment in Brooklyn with 3 roommates, worked entry-level coding jobs, and spent nights developing my own software ideas. The final breaking point came 5 years ago, during a Thanksgiving I'd reluctantly agreed to attend. I'd recently lost a promising job when the startup folded, and was struggling to land a new position. The last thing I needed was my family's judgment, but Grandma Eleanor had personally called to invite me. The dinner started with the usual passive-aggressive comments about my career choices. Then Heather, who had followed the approved path to Harvard Business and was now working at our father's firm, decided to drop a bomb. "So, Ethan," she said loudly, silencing other conversations, "I ran into Marcus Chin from your high school debate team. He's a VP at Goldman now." She paused for effect. "He was shocked to hear you were between opportunities again. Said something about how unexpected it was since you were always the smart one." My father snorted. "Smart doesn't pay bills. Practical decisions and hard work do. I am working hard." I defended myself. "The tech industry can be volatile, but I'm developing valuable skills and connections." "Skills and connections," my father mocked. 5 years out of college, and what do you have to show for it? Your sister was made junior partner last month." "Congratulations," I said to Heather, trying to diffuse the tension. She smiled sweetly. "Thanks. Not everyone can handle the pressure of real business. Some people need to find themselves." The conversation devolved from there, with every family member except Grandma joining the pile-on about my wasted potential and stubborn refusal to accept help. The final straw came when my father revealed he'd taken the liberty of setting up an interview for me at his firm, for an entry-level position working under Heather. "It's time to stop this tech fantasy and join the real world," he said. "Heather has graciously agreed to mentor you." Something in me snapped. Years of diminishment, of being made to feel less than, culminated in that moment. I stood up from the table. "I've built my life making my own choices, and I'll continue doing that," I said quietly. "I don't need or want positions arranged for me, especially ones designed to reinforce that I'm somehow lesser. There's that Walker pride." My mother sighed. "Always making things difficult." I looked around the table at my family. My father's contempt. My mother's disappointment. Heather's smug satisfaction. And for the first time, I saw them clearly. This wasn't love. This wasn't family support. This was control and conditional acceptance. "I'm done," I said simply. "Thank you for dinner." I walked out that night and cut contact with everyone except Grandma Eleanor. I changed my phone number, blocked emails, and even moved apartments. It was the hardest and best decision I ever made. The first year after cutting ties was brutally difficult. My tiny Brooklyn apartment barely fit a bed and desk. I worked 3 jobs, coding during the day for a small web development firm, bartending nights, and doing freelance tech support on weekends. Sleep became a luxury as I scraped together rent money while continuing to develop my own software ideas. The turning point came when I fixed a particularly nasty malware issue on a laptop belonging to Matthew Hayes, a regular at the bar where I worked. Impressed by my solution, he asked about my background. "You're obviously overqualified to be fixing computers and pouring drinks," he said after hearing my abbreviated life story. "What's your actual goal here?" I explained my concept for security software that could protect small businesses from increasingly sophisticated cyber attacks. Most existing solutions were either too expensive for small operations or too basic to be effective. I'd been coding a prototype in my sparse free time. Matthew, it turned out, was a venture capitalist specializing in tech startups. "Send me your business plan and prototype by Monday," he said, sliding his card across the bar. "And Ethan, don't be late." That weekend I didn't sleep. I refined my code, polished my business plan, and sent everything Sunday night. 3 days later, Matthew called. "You've got something here," he said. "Rough, but promising. I want to introduce you to some people." "Those people," turned out to be potential investors and experienced tech entrepreneurs who became mentors. With Matthew's guidance, I secured seed funding for what would become SecureVault, my cybersecurity company. The initial investment allowed me to quit my other jobs and focus entirely on development. The early days of SecureVault were intense. I worked from a small co-working space, hiring 2 other developers when we secured additional funding. Our first software release attracted attention from local businesses, and positive reviews led to wider adoption. From the beginning, I maintained strict privacy about my growing success. I registered the business using a holding company structure that made ownership difficult to trace. I stayed off social media and declined interviews with tech publications. This wasn't just about avoiding my family finding out. It was about building something genuine without external validation or interference. As SecureVault grew, so did my circle of supporters. Ryan Keller, my first hire, became my trusted operations officer. Sophia Jenkins, a brilliant marketing strategist I met through Matthew, helped build our brand without putting me personally in the spotlight. These colleagues became friends, and eventually, something like family. 3 years after founding SecureVault, we had 40 employees and offices in a converted warehouse in Brooklyn. Our security solutions were protecting thousands of small to mid-sized businesses across the country. I had become, by any objective measure, successful. More importantly, I was beginning to heal. Weekly sessions with Dr. Levy, a therapist specializing in family trauma, helped me understand the dysfunctional patterns I'd grown up with. I learned to recognize my own value without external validation. I began to build a life based on genuine connections rather than obligation or performance. One of those connections was Allison Reed, a talented graphic designer I met when her agency redesigned SecureVault's brand identity. Unlike previous relationships that had failed because I couldn't open up about my past, with Allison I found myself sharing everything: my family history, my struggles, my fears of never being good enough. "You know what's amazing about you?" she said one night as we walked along the Brooklyn waterfront. "You built all this without anyone telling you that you could." That takes incredible strength. With Allison, I experienced what healthy support felt like. She celebrated my wins without making them about her. She offered perspective during setbacks without diminishing my feelings. For the first time, I understood what partnership actually meant. As SecureVault approached its 5th year, we were preparing for a major expansion. We'd developed new enterprise-level security solutions that were attracting attention from larger companies. Investors were discussing a potential IPO that would value the company at over $200 million. I had recently purchased a brownstone in Park Slope, a far cry from the tiny apartment I'd started in. Through it all, I maintained minimal contact with my past. Occasional phone calls with Grandma Eleanor were my only connection to the Walker family. I never mentioned my business success, and she never pushed for details, just expressed happiness that I sounded well. Whether she reported back to my parents or sister, I didn't know or particularly care. I had created a life based on my own terms, filled with people who respected me and work that fulfilled me. I had proven to myself what should never have needed proving, that I was capable, worthy, and enough just as I was. Then, 5 years after walking away, came Heather's text about Grandma Eleanor's 80th birthday. And suddenly, my carefully separated worlds were about to collide. The text from Heather arrived on a Tuesday morning as I reviewed quarterly projections with my executive team. "Grandma Eleanor's 80th birthday dinner this Saturday. 6 p.m. at the house. She specifically asked for you to be there. Don't disappoint her again." The passive-aggressive tone was pure Heather, but something else about the message set off alarm bells. In 5 years, my sister had never reached out directly. Any family news came through Grandma during our occasional calls. I texted back a non-committal response and immediately called my grandmother. "Ethan, darling!" Her voice was warm but weaker than I remembered. "I was hoping Heather would reach out to you. She mentioned your birthday dinner. Are you really turning 80? That can't be right." She laughed. "Afraid so. The years don't ask permission, do they? I would love to see you, but I understand if it's too difficult." Something in her tone made me pause. Grandma, do you actually want me there, or is the family pressuring you about this? A long silence followed. I miss you, Ethan. Very much. It would mean everything to have all my grandchildren together for this birthday. But I know there are complications. Have they been talking about me? I asked carefully. Another pause. Your father mentions you occasionally. Heather more so lately. They don't tell me much about their conversations with you. Because there weren't any. Interesting that they'd let her believe we were in contact. I'll be there, Grandma. I promised. I wouldn't miss your birthday. After hanging up, I stared at Heather's text again. Why now? 5 years of silence, and suddenly I was needed at a family gathering? It didn't track with the Walker family I knew, who prided themselves on closing ranks. That afternoon, I received another unusual message, this time from my cousin Derek, who I'd always been friendly with but hadn't spoken to since the estrangement. Good to hear you're coming Saturday. Been too long. Heads up though. Heather's been asking a lot of questions about you. Not sure what's up, but thought you should know. The warning increased my unease. That evening, I mentioned the situation to Allison over dinner. It sounds like a setup, she said, frowning. What kind of questions has Heather been asking? According to Derek, she's been trying to find out what I've been doing, where I'm living, if I've gotten my act together yet. Do they have any idea about Secure Vault? Your actual life? I shook my head. I've been careful. The company isn't publicly connected to me in ways they'd easily find. I never mentioned specifics to Grandma, and she never asked. So what's your plan? Are you actually going? I promised Grandma. She's 80, and she's the only one who ever really supported me. I hesitated. Would you come with me? As backup? Allison reached across the table to squeeze my hand. Of course. I've been curious about this family of yours anyway. Over the next few days, the strange messages continued. An old high school friend mentioned that Heather had contacted him asking about my situation. My mother sent a text saying she was looking forward to reconnecting, after all the unfortunate misunderstandings. The most concerning message came Friday morning, an anonymous email from a throwaway account. Thought you should know Heather has something planned for the dinner tomorrow. Not sure what exactly, but she's been smug about it for weeks. Said something about finally proving everyone right about you. Watch your back, cousin. I forwarded the email to Ryan, my COO, with instructions to be on standby throughout Saturday evening in case I needed emergency assistance with anything business-related. I also made sure all my company documentation and identification were securely locked in my home's safe. Something told me I needed to be prepared for anything. The drive from New York to Boston on Saturday afternoon gave me time to fill Allison in on the full Walker family history. I told her about the constant criticism, the impossible standards, the golden child treatment of Heather, and the final Thanksgiving confrontation that led to my departure. I still don't understand what they could be planning, Allison said as we crossed into Massachusetts. Even if they think you've failed, what would be the point of embarrassing you at your grandmother's birthday? Control, I said simply. It was never about helping me succeed. It was about making me succeed on their terms, in ways that reflected well on them. My leaving threatened that control. Whatever Heather's planning, I guarantee it's about reasserting the family narrative that I was wrong and they were right. As we turned onto the familiar elm-lined street of my childhood, I felt a tightening in my chest. The Walker family home looked exactly as I remembered, imposing colonial architecture, perfect landscaping, an air of old money and tradition. Several luxury cars already lined the circular driveway. Ready for this? Allison asked as I parked. I looked at the house where I'd never been enough. At the windows where my family was likely watching our arrival. At the door I'd walked out of 5 years ago. No, I admitted. But Grandma deserves to see me on her birthday. The rest of them, well, let them try whatever they're planning. I'm not the same person who left. We stepped out of the car, and I took Allison's hand as we walked toward the front door. Whatever ambush awaited inside, I would face it on my terms. The moment I rang the doorbell, I regretted not bringing a flask. My mother answered, her practiced smile freezing momentarily as she registered Allison's presence beside me. "Ethan! What a wonderful surprise!" She air-kissed my cheek, her perfume overwhelming. "And you've brought a friend." "Allison Reed, my girlfriend," I said firmly. "Allison, this is my mother, Diane Walker." "Lovely to meet you, Mrs. Walker," Allison said warmly, extending her hand. "Thank you for including me in your family celebration." My mother's smile tightened as she shook Allison's hand. "How unexpected. Well, everyone's in the living room. Do come in." The Walker home hadn't changed, gleaming hardwood floors, ancestral portraits, the careful curation of old wealth. As we entered the living room, conversations halted. My father, holding court by the fireplace, glanced up with a dismissive nod. Aunts, uncles, and cousins stared with undisguised curiosity. And there was Heather, whispering to a man I didn't recognize, her expression shifting from surprise to something like satisfaction when she saw us. Only Grandma Eleanor's reaction seemed genuine. She rose shakily from her armchair, her face lighting up. "Ethan! You came!" She embraced me with fragile arms. "And who is this lovely young woman?" I introduced Allison, watching as my grandmother clasped her hands warmly. "Anyone who puts that smile on my grandson's face is welcome here," she declared, loud enough for everyone to hear. The next hour was an exercise in forced politeness. Family members made stilted conversation, carefully avoiding any direct questions about my life while dropping hints about their own successes. My father remained aloof, observing from a distance. Heather circulated the room, that same satisfied smile playing on her lips whenever our eyes met. The man she'd been whispering with watched me intently. Mid-40s, expensive suit, analytical gaze. He wasn't family, and no one introduced him. He maintained a professional distance, accepting a drink but barely sipping it, checking his watch periodically. "Your sister keeps looking at you like she's won something," Allison murmured as we stood by the hors d'oeuvres. "And what's with the mystery man?" "No idea," I replied. "But something's definitely coming." When dinner was announced, I discovered we'd been seated directly across from my father and sister, with the mystery man placed at Heather's right. My mother had strategically separated Allison and me, placing her between distant relatives who immediately engaged her in pointed questions about her background and career. The first course arrived with the interrogation. "So, Ethan," my father began, swirling his wine. 5 years is a long time. What exactly have you been doing with yourself?" I took a measured sip of water. "Working. Building a life." "In what field?" he pressed. "Last we spoke you were..." "Between opportunities. I'm in technology, as I always planned to be." Heather leaned forward. "What kind of technology? Any companies we might have heard of?" "Possibly," I said vaguely. "I prefer to focus on the work rather than recognition." "How modest," she replied, exchanging glances with our father. "Always the humble one." The conversation continued in this vein through the soup and salad courses. Probing questions about my career, living situation, and finances, all delivered with thin veneer of familial interest. I provided truthful but nonspecific answers, watching as their frustration grew. By the main course, my father had abandoned subtlety. "I notice you didn't bring a gift for your grandmother," he observed loudly. "Financial constraints, I assume?" I met his gaze steadily. "Actually, I had something delivered earlier this week." "Grandma, did you receive the package I sent? The first edition Fitzgerald?" My grandmother brightened. "Yes, dear. The Great Gatsby, my favorite. Such a thoughtful gift." My father's expression soured. First editions of Fitzgerald weren't cheap, a fact he well knew as a collector himself. As dessert was being served and my grandmother opened her other gifts, I sensed the atmosphere shifting. Family members exchanged knowing looks. Heather checked her phone repeatedly, then nodded slightly to the mystery man. My father straightened in his chair, expectant. After the last gift was opened and the birthday cake served, Heather stood, tapping her glass for attention. Before we conclude Grandma's special evening, there's something important I'd like to address. Her gaze fixed on me. Family is everything to us Walkers. When a member of the family distances themselves, it affects us all, especially our beloved grandmother. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the table. My grandmother looked confused. For 5 years, we've respected Ethan's decision to find his own path. Heather continued. But family deserves honesty. When someone claims to be doing well while refusing to share any details of their life, it raises questions. I felt Allison tense across the table. I kept my expression neutral, though my heart hammered. So, Heather smiled tightly. I took it upon myself to get some answers. I'd like to introduce Max Reynolds, a private investigator I hired to look into Ethan's situation. The mystery man stood, nodding professionally to the stunned table. Several relatives gasped. Grandma Eleanor's face paled. Heather, is this really necessary? She asked weakly. It's for the family's peace of mind, Grandma, Heather assured her. Mr. Reynolds has prepared a comprehensive report on Ethan's activities these past 5 years. I think you'll all find it illuminating. Reynolds produced a manila envelope, which Heather took with poorly concealed triumph. Shall I summarize the findings? She asked, looking directly at me. Or would you prefer to finally tell the truth yourself about your so-called successful life? The table fell silent. All eyes turned to me, most expecting embarrassment or confession. Instead, I leaned back in my chair, surprising myself with how calm I felt. By all means, Heather. You've gone to such trouble. Please enlighten us. Her smile faltered slightly at my confidence. She opened the envelope and began pulling out photographs. According to Mr. Reynolds' investigation, Ethan is supposedly the founder and CEO of a company called Secure Vault. She laid down the first photo, showing our company headquarters. This is apparently where he works. My father frowned, studying the image of the modern office building. He claims to have developed cybersecurity software that's used by thousands of businesses. She placed down several more photos, me entering the building, speaking at a company meeting, at a product launch. The family's expressions shifted from anticipation to confusion. This wasn't the evidence of failure they'd expected. Heather continued, her voice losing some of its smugness. Mr. Reynolds also found documentation of recent investments valuing this company at over $200 million, with Ethan Walker as majority shareholder. My father's head snapped up, his face draining of color. My mother gasped audibly. There's also this, Heather said, less certainly now, placing down a photo of my Brooklyn brownstone. His current residence purchased last year for $4.3 million. Silence engulfed the table. Heather frantically shuffled through more documents, her planned exposure crumbling before her eyes. And most recently, Reynolds interjected, speaking for the first time. Mr. Walker's company is preparing for an IPO that financial analysts project will value Secure Vault at approximately $500 million. My grandmother's trembling hand covered her mouth. Ethan, is this true? I nodded simply. Yes, Grandma. I founded Secure Vault 5 years ago. We provide cybersecurity solutions to businesses across the country and are expanding internationally next year. Why didn't you tell us? My mother asked weakly. You never asked, I replied. You assumed I had failed because I didn't follow your path. That assumption was more comfortable than considering I might succeed on my own terms. Reynolds cleared his throat awkwardly. There's one more item in my report that Ms. Walker didn't mention. He produced another document. Mr. Walker established the Eleanor Walker Foundation for Educational Access 3 years ago, which has provided technology education scholarships to over 200 underprivileged students. It's named after his grandmother. Tears welled in Grandma Eleanor's eyes. Across the table, Allison smiled proudly at me. My father stood abruptly, his chair scraping harshly against the floor. You'll have to excuse me, he muttered, and strode from the room. Heather stared at the scattered evidence of my success, her carefully orchestrated exposure transformed into an unintentional vindication. Well, she said finally, forcing a laugh that didn't reach her eyes. I guess congratulations are in order, little brother. Who would have thought? But her words rang hollow in the stunned silence of the room, as the family absorbed the reality that the failure they'd anticipated had become something entirely different. The silence that followed felt interminable. Family members exchanged uncomfortable glances, processing the unexpected revelation of my success. My mother recovered first, her socialite training kicking in. Ethan, darling, this is wonderful news! She exclaimed with sudden enthusiasm. Though I can't imagine why you've kept your achievements secret from your family who loves you so much. I raised an eyebrow. Can't you? Before she could respond, my father re-entered the room, composure regained but face still ashen. He cleared his throat. It seems congratulations are indeed in order. Your technology hobby has apparently paid off. It's not a hobby, Dad. It's a company I built from nothing, without connections or nepotism or family money. Just hard work and believing in myself when no one else would. Well, he shifted uncomfortably. Clearly you inherited the Walker business acumen. That entrepreneurial spirit runs in our blood. I couldn't help but laugh. Is that what we're doing now? Taking credit? I'm merely pointing out that your success reflects the values and intelligence this family instilled in you, he replied stiffly. Heather, still reeling from her backfired plan, attempted to salvage her position. If you're so successful, Ethan, why completely cut us off? Most people would want to share their achievements with family. Would they? I looked around the table. Most families celebrate each other's successes rather than actively undermine them. Most families support rather than criticize. Most families love unconditionally. That's unfair, my mother protested. We've always wanted what's best for you. I always believed in you, even when your choices seemed questionable. Really? I challenged. Because I distinctly remember being told I was wasting my potential, making poor decisions, and disappointing everyone. Not once did anyone in this family say they believed in me. We were trying to guide you, my father insisted. Push you to excellence. No, you were trying to control me, I corrected. There's a difference. Grandma Eleanor, who had been silently taking everything in, finally spoke. I think I need to understand what's happened here. Heather, you hired a private investigator to look into Ethan's life? Why would you do such a thing? Heather squirmed under our grandmother's direct question. I was concerned about him, Grandma. He disappeared from our lives, wouldn't tell us anything about what he was doing. For all we knew, he could have been in trouble. So your plan was to expose this supposed trouble at my birthday dinner? Grandma asked, her voice uncharacteristically sharp. How exactly would that have helped Ethan? Heather faltered. I thought if he was struggling, we could intervene. Help him get back on track. Bullshit, Allison said suddenly, drawing gasps from around the table. Excuse my language, Mrs. Walker. She addressed my grandmother. But that's simply not true. You weren't planning an intervention. You were planning a public humiliation. And who exactly are you to make such accusations? My mother asked frostily. I'm someone who actually knows Ethan. Allison replied evenly. Someone who's seen how hard he's worked, how much he's achieved, and how the mere mention of his family causes him pain. I'm someone who loves him for exactly who he is, not who I think he should be. The private investigator, Reynolds, who had been standing uncomfortably to the side during this exchange, cleared his throat. If I may, there's something else the family should know. All eyes turned to him. During my investigation, I uncovered some troubling information. He glanced at Heather, who looked suddenly alarmed. Information not included in the official report, as it wasn't part of my assignment regarding Mr. Walker's current situation. What kind of information? I asked. Evidence that certain members of this family actively attempted to sabotage your early career efforts. He pulled out another folder. Specifically, I found communications indicating that Franklin Walker contacted several technology firms in New York shortly after your graduation, advising them against hiring you." The room erupted in exclamations. My father's face flushed dark red. "That's preposterous," he sputtered. "I made a few calls expressing legitimate concerns about my son's preparedness for certain positions. That's hardly sabotage. You told potential employers I was unreliable and difficult?" I asked, the pieces finally clicking into place. The mysterious rescinded job offers, the interviews that went well but led nowhere. "I was trying to guide you back to a sensible path," he insisted. "Sometimes children need to experience setbacks to recognize their mistakes." Grandma Eleanor looked stricken. "Franklin, how could you?" "There's more," Reynolds continued reluctantly. "Ms. Walker," he nodded toward Heather, "has been telling family acquaintances and business associates that Ethan has been struggling with substance abuse issues. That's why she initially hired me, to locate rehabilitation facilities he might have attended." A hot wave of anger washed over me. "You told people I was an addict?" "I never used that word specifically," Heather defended weakly. "I just mentioned you were getting help for your issues. People assumed. Which was exactly what you wanted them to assume," I finished for her. "Why, Heather? What did I ever do to you that warranted this kind of character assassination?" For the first time, her composure cracked completely. "You were always the smart one. The special one. Dad pushed me twice as hard because you were naturally gifted. Then you walked away from everything, rejected everything our family stands for, and I needed to prove you had failed. That your rebellion had consequences. So this was about jealousy?" I asked incredulously. "It was about fairness," she snapped. "You got to leave and do whatever you wanted while I stayed and did everything right, everything expected of me." "And for what?" "Dad still compares my quarterly performance reports to what you might have achieved if you joined the firm." I turned to my father in disbelief. "Is that true? You've been using me as a hypothetical measuring stick against your own daughter?" He didn't answer, which was answer enough. Brian, Heather's husband, who had been silent throughout the dinner, finally spoke. "I told you this plan was wrong, Heather. I told you hiring an investigator crossed the line." "You knew about this?" Grandma Eleanor asked him. Brian nodded uncomfortably. "I advised against it, but Heather was determined. Because I needed to know," Heather exclaimed. "I needed to know if walking away and rejecting everything we value actually led to happiness. If Ethan's rebellion was rewarded while my compliance was taken for granted." In that moment, beneath my anger, I felt a flash of something unexpected, pity. Heather had stayed, played by all the rules, and still found herself unfulfilled and insecure. "For what it's worth," I said more gently, "I didn't leave to reject you personally, Heather. I left because I needed to find my own path. A path that made you a millionaire," she said bitterly. "A path that made me happy," I corrected. "The success came because I was finally doing what I was meant to do, not what someone else thought I should do." My Uncle Robert, my father's older brother, who had been listening intently, suddenly spoke. "Franklin, this reminds me of when you wanted to start that tech company back in the 80s. Before Father convinced you to join the family investment firm instead." The room grew still. This was family history I'd never heard. "That was different," my father said tightly. "That was a pipe dream." "Was it?" Uncle Robert pressed. "Or was it your genuine passion that you abandoned because it didn't fit the Walker family image? A passion you then resented seeing in your son?" My father stood again, his hands shaking slightly. "This dinner is over for me. Mother, happy birthday. Ethan, congratulations on your company." Without another word, he left the room. My mother hesitated, then followed him. In the uncomfortable silence that followed, I turned to Reynolds. "Thank you for your honesty. It couldn't have been easy to reveal that information to your client." The investigator nodded. "I have professional ethics, Mr. Walker." When I realized my investigation was being used for personal vendetta rather than genuine concern, I felt obligated to provide the complete picture. As the dinner party dissolved into awkward clusters of conversation, I found myself alone with Grandma Eleanor in a corner of the living room. Her eyes were sad but clear. I had no idea, Ethan, about any of this. I knew there was tension, but not this level of dysfunction. It's not your fault, Grandma. Perhaps not directly, she sighed. But I raised your father. Somewhere along the line, I failed to teach him that love isn't conditional, that success isn't measured by titles or bank accounts. I took her fragile hand in mine. You didn't fail. You were the one person in this family who always made me feel valued just for being me. Tears shimmered in her eyes. I am so proud of what you've built, Ethan. Not because it's successful by the world's standards, but because it's authentic to who you are. As the evening wound down, Heather approached me as Allison and I prepared to leave. Her earlier confidence was gone, replaced by something more vulnerable. Can we talk? Just for a minute? Allison squeezed my hand. I'll wait by the car. When we were alone, Heather struggled to meet my eyes. I owe you an apology. Tonight didn't go as I never expected. That I might have succeeded without the Walker blueprint for success? She nodded, looking suddenly very young. I convinced myself you must be failing because the alternative was too confronting. If you could leave and thrive, what did that say about my choices to stay? Our choices don't have to be in opposition, Heather. Your path isn't wrong because mine is different. But are you happier? She asked quietly. Because sometimes I feel like I'm drowning in expectations I never questioned. The honesty of her question caught me off guard. Yes, I answered simply. I'm happier being authentic than I ever was trying to be what someone else wanted. She nodded slowly, absorbing this. I don't know if we can ever be close, after everything. But I am sorry, Ethan. For tonight. For the things I said about you. For not being a better sister. It wasn't a complete reconciliation, but it was perhaps the most honest exchange we'd ever had. As Allison and I drove back to New York that night, I felt something shift inside me, a sense of closure I hadn't realized I needed. The drive back to New York was mostly silent. Allison drove while I processed the evening's revelations, the confrontations, the unexpected moments of honesty amid the wreckage of my family's carefully maintained facades. You okay? She asked as we crossed the state line into New York. I don't know, I admitted. I expected an ambush, but not, whatever that was. A reckoning, maybe, she suggested. For everyone. I nodded, watching the highway lights blur past. I should feel vindicated, I guess. They wanted to expose my failure and instead exposed their own toxicity. But mostly I just feel sad. For them? For all of us, I said. For the relationships we could have had if they'd been capable of accepting me as I am. For Heather, trapped in a life that's suffocating her. For my father, who apparently abandoned his own dreams and resented seeing me pursue mine. We arrived home past midnight, emotionally drained. I checked my phone to find several missed calls and messages, including one from Grandma Eleanor asking me to call her tomorrow. And surprisingly, one from the private investigator, Reynolds, asking if we could meet. The next morning, I called my grandmother first. Ethan, thank you for calling, she said, her voice stronger than it had been at the dinner. Last night has given me a great deal to think about. Me too, Grandma. I want you to know that I've spoken with your father. Quite firmly, in fact. About his behavior, past and present. She paused. I'm not sure it made much difference, but I needed to say my piece. You didn't have to do that. I did, actually. For my own conscience. She sighed. Ethan, I'd like to see more of you. On your terms, separate from family gatherings. Would you be open to that? The request touched me deeply. I'd like that very much, Grandma. Good. Because I'm not getting any younger, and I'd like to know my grandson properly. The real one, not the version your parents talk about. After promising to arrange a visit soon, I called Reynolds next, curious about his request to meet. We arranged to meet at a cafe near my office that afternoon. The investigator arrived precisely on time, carrying a leather portfolio. "Thank you for meeting me, Mr. Walker," he said as we sat with our coffees. "I wanted to follow up after last night's unexpected developments. I appreciate your honesty during the dinner," I told him. "That couldn't have been easy, revealing those findings to your client." Reynolds nodded. "In my line of work, I often see families at their worst. Surveillance for divorce cases, corporate espionage, background checks motivated by suspicion rather than diligence. Your situation was illuminating." "How so?" "I was hired to find evidence of failure, Mr. Walker. When I instead found evidence of remarkable success, the ethical course became clear." He opened his portfolio. "But that's not why I wanted to meet. During my investigation, I uncovered something else I thought you should be aware of." He slid a document across the table. It was an email chain between my father and several business associates, dated just 3 months ago. "Your father has been making inquiries about acquiring cybersecurity companies," Reynolds explained, "specifically targeting firms that might compete with SecureVault." I scanned the emails, my stomach tightening. He was looking to neutralize potential competition before approaching me. "That would be my assessment," Reynolds confirmed. "Based on the timing, I believe he was planning to approach you with some kind of partnership or acquisition offer, perhaps using your grandmother's birthday as the opportunity. Then Heather's plan disrupted his," I realized. "They were working at cross purposes without knowing it." Reynolds nodded. "Family dynamics often involve competing agendas." "For what it's worth, I don't believe your sister knew about your father's plans." After Reynolds left, I sat alone in the cafe, contemplating this new information. My father hadn't given up on controlling my path, he'd just adapted his strategy. Rather than forcing me into the family business, he'd been planning to bring my business under family control. That evening, I received a text from Heather. "Can we talk?" "Really talk?" "No agendas this time." After some deliberation, I agreed to a video call the following evening. When her face appeared on my screen, I was struck by how tired she looked, the polished Walker facade noticeably absent. "Thank you for agreeing to speak with me," she began formally, then seemed to deflate. "God, listen to me. Even now, I can't just talk to my own brother like a normal person." "Maybe try," I suggested. "Just say what you're actually thinking, not what you think a Walker should say." She took a deep breath. "Okay. I'm jealous of you, Ethan. I always have been. You had the courage to leave, to build something that's truly yours. I stayed and did everything right, everything expected, and I feel empty." The admission hung between us, raw and honest in a way we'd never been with each other. "What would you do if you could choose anything?" I asked. She laughed humorlessly. "That's just it. I don't even know anymore. I've spent so long being what everyone expected that I'm not sure who I actually am." She paused. "How did you know that leaving was the right choice?" "I didn't know for sure," I admitted. "I just knew staying would slowly kill something essential in me." We talked for nearly 2 hours, more openly than we ever had before. Heather shared her growing dissatisfaction with her role at our father's firm, her marriage that looked perfect on paper but felt hollow in practice. I told her about the early struggles of building SecureVault, the failures and doubts before the success. "I can't just walk away like you did," she said eventually. "That's not who I am. But maybe I can start making smaller changes. Setting boundaries. It won't be easy," I warned. "Dad doesn't respond well to boundaries." "No kidding." She smiled faintly. "Speaking of Dad, has he contacted you yet?" "No." "Why?" She hesitated. "Just be prepared. I overheard him talking with his lawyers about cybersecurity acquisitions. I think he has plans involving your company." So Reynolds had been right. Thanks for the warning. As predicted, my father's call came the next day. His tone was businesslike, as if the emotional confrontations at the dinner had never occurred. "Ethan, I've been looking into this company of yours. Impressive work. I'd like to discuss potential synergies between Walker Investments and Secure Vault. Perhaps a strategic partnership." "I'm not interested in a partnership, Dad." "Don't be hasty," he replied smoothly. "There could be significant advantages for both sides. We have connections, resources, experience you could benefit from. My company is doing fine without Walker connections or resources, thanks." His voice hardened slightly. "At least agree to hear a proposal. That's just good business sense. Is it? Or is it another attempt to bring me under your control?" A telling silence followed. "This isn't about control, Ethan. It's about opportunity. The opportunity for you to claim credit for my success? To make my achievements part of the Walker legacy after trying to sabotage my career? That's ancient history," he dismissed. "Business is business. Family is family. Sometimes they can complement each other." "Not in this case," I said firmly. "My company remains independent. That's non-negotiable." After hanging up, I called Ryan to alert him about potential overtures from Walker Investments. "Make sure our board understands that we're not entertaining acquisition offers, especially from my family's firm." Over the following weeks, I maintained firm boundaries with my father, declining multiple meeting requests disguised as family reconciliation attempts. My mother sent several messages expressing her confusion about why I was being difficult again. I responded politely but distantly. With Grandma Eleanor, however, I began building a new relationship. I arranged for a car service to bring her to New York for a weekend visit to see my home and company. Watching her face light up as I showed her around the Secure Vault offices, introducing her to my team, explaining our technology in terms she could understand, I found a joy I hadn't anticipated. "You've built something remarkable here," she told me as we had dinner in my brownstone that evening. "Not just a business, but a life that's truly yours." "It wasn't always easy," I admitted. "The worthwhile things rarely are." She patted my hand. "I'm sorry I didn't see what was happening years ago. Between your father and you, between Heather and you. You couldn't have fixed it, Grandma." "Perhaps not. But I could have supported you more openly." She straightened her shoulders. "I'm making changes too, you know. I've updated my will. Certain family members are quite displeased about it." I raised an eyebrow. "Should I ask?" She smiled. "Let's just say I'm ensuring that the family legacy isn't defined solely by your father's vision. Some of my assets will go directly to you and to causes you care about. The educational foundation you created in my name, for instance." The drive back from Grandma's weekend visit gave me time to reflect on the seismic shifts in my family relationships. Some bridges were being cautiously rebuilt, others permanently burned, still others transformed into something new and undefined. When I returned home, I found Allison waiting with dinner prepared and a bottle of wine open. As we ate, I shared the details of the weekend and my reflections. "I used to think that cutting ties with my family was the hardest thing I'd ever done," I told her. "But I'm realizing that navigating these new boundaries might be even harder. There's no clean break anymore, just complicated, messy human relationships." "That's life though, isn't it?" she replied. "Messy, complicated, but potentially beautiful because of that complexity." Looking at her across the table, I felt a sudden certainty. "Move in with me." She blinked in surprise. "What?" "Move in with me," I repeated. "I love you. After everything that's happened, I'm more certain than ever that you're the family I've chosen. The person I want to build a life with." Her slow smile was all the answer I needed. That night, lying awake with Allison sleeping beside me, I thought about the strange path that had led me here. My sister's plan to expose me had indeed exposed the truth, just not the truth she had expected. It had forced confrontations long overdue, revealed motivations long hidden, and ultimately, created space for something new to emerge from the wreckage of what had been. Not forgiveness, exactly. Some actions couldn't be simply forgiven, but perhaps understanding. And with understanding, the possibility of moving forward not as the family we had been, but as the adults we were now, making conscious choices about our relationships rather than blindly following toxic patterns. It wasn't a fairy tale ending. There would be more difficult conversations, more boundaries tested, more painful truths uncovered. But for the first time, I felt ready to face whatever came next, standing firmly in the life I had built, surrounded by the people who truly saw and accepted me. Sometimes I realized, being exposed is the best thing that can happen to you. Not as a failure, as Heather had intended, but as your authentic self, finally seen in the full light of truth. 6 months after the fateful birthday dinner, I stood on the balcony of Secure Vault's new headquarters, watching the early morning sunlight glint off Manhattan skylines. Below me, employees were beginning to arrive, the lifeblood of the company I'd built from nothing. The IPO had gone through 2 months earlier, exceeding even our optimistic projections. Financial newspapers had run profiles on the secretive tech genius behind Secure Vault, much to my discomfort. Privacy had become harder to maintain, but the success had cemented something important: vindication, not in my family's eyes, but in my own. My phone buzzed with a message from Allison. Grandma's flight landed. Car service picking her up now. See you at home for lunch? I smiled, texting back confirmation. Grandma Eleanor was making her 3rd visit to New York since the birthday confrontation. At 80, she'd shown remarkable adaptability, embracing video calls, following Secure Vault's progress online, and most surprisingly, establishing firm boundaries with my father. Their relationship had become strained when she made good on her promise to update her will, directing a significant portion of her estate to my educational foundation and setting up trusts for all grandchildren that couldn't be controlled by their parents. My father had been furious, seeing it as yet another betrayal connected to me. Your grandmother is being influenced in her vulnerable state, he'd claimed during one of his increasingly rare calls. This isn't like her. Actually, I'd replied, I think this is exactly like her. You just never gave her the space to show it before. My relationship with my father remained distant but had evolved into something resembling a cold professional respect. After his attempts to acquire Secure Vault were firmly rebuffed, he'd shifted to occasional stiff inquiries about the business. I answered politely but without detail. Some boundaries needed to remain absolute. With my mother, the relationship had taken an unexpected turn. After initially siding with my father, as she always had, she'd reached out separately 2 months after the dinner. I've been seeing a therapist, she'd admitted, shocking me into momentary silence. After everything that happened at your grandmother's birthday, I realized some patterns in our family weren't healthy. While her insights were still filtered through a lifetime of ingrained behaviors, there was something genuine in her efforts. We now spoke monthly, our conversations careful but gradually warming. She'd even visited once, marveling at the brownstone with pride that, for once, didn't seem to be about how it reflected on her. The most profound change had been with Heather. Our video call the night after the dinner had opened a door either of us had known how to find before. Weekly calls had followed, then occasional visits. She'd begun making small but significant changes in her life, enrolling in a photography course she'd always been interested in, establishing boundaries with our father at work, even considering starting a family foundation separate from the Walker name. I'll never be like you, Ethan, she'd told me during her last visit. I can't just blow everything up and start from scratch. But I'm learning to carve out spaces that are truly mine. It wasn't perfect reconciliation. Too much had happened for that. But it was something authentic, built on honest recognition of past harm rather than pretense. As I prepared to leave the office for lunch with Grandma Eleanor and Allison, my assistant reminded me about the afternoon's meeting with the Eleanor Walker Foundation Board. We'd expanded the program significantly, now providing not just scholarships but also mentorship and startup funding for underprivileged students interested in technology. The foundation had become my way of transforming the pain of my family history into something constructive. Every student who received support to pursue their authentic path felt like a small victory against the forces that try to confine people to predetermined roles and expectations. Arriving home, I found Allison and Grandma Eleanor already deep in conversation at the kitchen island, laughing over something on Allison's tablet. "There he is," Grandma said warmly, standing to embrace me. "I was just telling Allison about the retirement community's computer class. I'm helping the other residents learn how to video chat with their grandchildren. She's the most popular teacher they have," Allison added, smiling. "Mrs. Abernathy apparently has a crush." "Walter is a perfect gentleman," Grandma protested, her eyes twinkling. "And at our age, a crush is harmless fun." Over lunch, our conversation flowed easily, covering everything from foundation business to Grandma's social calendar to Allison's latest graphic design projects. There was a comfortable familiarity to it, the feeling of chosen family rather than obligatory connection. "I heard from Heather yesterday," Grandma mentioned as we cleared the dishes. "She and Brian are talking about starting a family." "That's a big step," I said. "Especially given how things have been between them." "She said they've been in counseling," Grandma replied. "Working through some things. She seems lighter somehow." After lunch, Grandma insisted on seeing the Eleanor Walker Foundation offices, so we took a car downtown. Watching her interact with the staff, take genuine interest in the student applications being reviewed, I felt a surge of gratitude for this second chance at relationship with her. "You know," she said as we toured the conference room where mentorship sessions were held, "I always knew you had this in you. Even when you were small. This capacity to build something meaningful. You were the only one who saw it," I admitted. "No," she corrected gently. "You saw it too. That's what saved you. You trusted your own vision of yourself more than you trusted their limitations." That evening, after Grandma had returned to her hotel to rest before the Foundation scholarship dinner the following night, Allison and I walked through Brooklyn Bridge Park, watching the sunset paint the skyline in gold and crimson. "I've been thinking," I said, stopping at a quiet spot overlooking the water. "Always dangerous," she teased. "Very funny." I took both her hands in mine. "These past 6 months, watching everything shift and change with my family, it's made me think about what family really means. What commitment means." Her eyes widened slightly as I reached into my pocket and dropped to one knee. "Allison Reed, you've been with me through the hardest year of my life. You've seen the worst of my family drama and stayed anyway. You've helped me build something new from the ashes of what was broken." I opened the small velvet box, revealing the emerald-cut diamond within. "Will you marry me? Build a different kind of family with me, one based on respect and genuine love." "Yes," she whispered, tears shimmering in her eyes. "Absolutely yes." Later that night, as Allison slept beside me, I opened my laptop to find an email from Heather. The subject line read simply, "Thank you. I've been thinking about that night at Grandma's birthday," she'd written. "About how my plan to expose you backfired in the most spectacular way possible." I wanted to say that I'm grateful it did. Not just because it began our reconciliation, but because it forced me to confront truths about our family that I'd been avoiding for years. The truth may have shocked everyone that night, but some shocks are necessary. Some exposures are healing. For the first time in my life, I'm trying to figure out who I am outside of being Franklin Walker's daughter. It's terrifying and exhilarating. I think I'm finally beginning to understand what drove you to leave all those years ago. I closed the laptop, reflecting on the strange, twisting path that had led here. The private investigator meant to expose my failure had instead revealed my success. The family dinner meant to humiliate me had instead begun a difficult but necessary reckoning. The sister who'd tried to tear me down had ended up finding her own voice in the process. The next morning, I arrived early at the Secure Vault offices, gathering with the leadership team I'd carefully built over the years. These were the people who'd believed in my vision, who'd worked alongside me through the lean years and the challenges. As we prepared for the quarterly all-hands meeting, I looked around the conference room at these faces that had become as familiar as family. Ryan, my COO, who'd taken a chance on an unproven startup when he could have had his pick of established firms. Sophia, our marketing director, whose brilliance had helped shape our brand without putting me in the spotlight. Matthew, my mentor-turned-investor, who'd seen potential where others saw only risk. And later today, I would host the Foundation's scholarship dinner, surrounded by students who were forging their own paths, sometimes against significant odds. Tomorrow, Allison and I would begin planning our wedding, the formal beginning of the family we were choosing to build. This, I realized, was the true legacy I wanted to create. Not one based on the Walker name or fortune, but on authentic connections, genuine support, and the courage to live by one's own values rather than inherited expectations. As the all-hands meeting began and I stood to address the company, I thought about the question that had haunted me for years: was I enough? The answer, I now knew with certainty, had always been yes. Not because of achievement or financial success, but simply because worth isn't something that needs to be earned or proven. It exists independently of others' recognition or approval. Sometimes the greatest act of courage is simply being exactly who you are, even when those who should love you most try to convince you that who you are isn't enough. Sometimes the most profound revolution is the quiet decision to walk your own path, to build something true to your own vision rather than someone else's expectations. And sometimes, when others try to expose you at your most vulnerable, they end up revealing truths they never intended, truths that ultimately set everyone free. What about you? Have you ever had to choose between meeting others' expectations and being true to yourself? Drop a comment below to share your experience. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe to hear more stories about finding authentic paths through difficult family dynamics. And if you know someone who might need to hear this message today, share this video with them. Sometimes knowing we're not alone in these struggles makes all the difference. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember, the most powerful thing you can be in this world is authentically yourself.